All right, hello. Welcome back to Guided Notes. After a brief intermission, we have returned with Endocrine System Day 1. And we're talking about now the endocrine system, which is our body system that is most well known for its role with hormones. Now, hormones you may have heard of with relation to perhaps puberty. And hormones are obviously involved in puberty, but hormones are involved in our body's slow chemical communication. So that includes growth and development, right? So hormones are the chemical messengers of the endocrine system. Right? And we just talked about the nervous system, which is quick electrochemical communication, whereas our endocrine system is that slower chemical communication, responsible for things like our circadian rhythm. So waking up in the morning and sleeping at night, and maintaining sleep patterns, things like growth and development. So these are functions of the endocrine system that we're about to get more into. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, these first two questions are not about anything we've covered yet, but after we read this, we should be able to go back and answer those questions. So let's skip 1 and 2. You may be able to guess already, but let's skip 1 and 2 and let's go on to part A. And we'll go back up to those at the top, all right? So today's aim is how does our body communicate internally? And today's communication is all about the endocrine system and that slow chemical communication contrasted with the quick communication of the nervous system. So Part A, Endocrine System Introduction. The human endocrine system is made up of endocrine glands, which secrete hormones directly into the blood. The hormones are transported by the circulatory system to the organs and tissues. So we can see here, hormones are secreted by these endocrine glands, right? So they are chemicals that are produced inside of glands in the endocrine system. And just like nutrients and gases, they travel through the blood. So the method of communication in the endocrine system is slow chemical communication. Why is it so slow? It's because it's traveling through the circulatory system with everything else, right? One of the passengers in the bloodmobile was hormones. So these hormones are transported by the circulatory system to the organs and tissues, and different organs and tissues have receptors that receive those messages from different hormones. And we're going to talk about that relationship between hormones and their receptors more as we continue to discuss the endocrine system. So hormones. Oh, this allows for the regulation of overall, and so these are functions of the endocrine system, metabolism, homeostasis, which is broad, right? All of these body systems are involved in homeostasis, but growth and reproduction, these are two functions that you have probably already associated in your minds with hormones, and for good reason, right? But our metabolism, other facets of our body's ability to maintain homeostasis, such as blood sugar, which we're going to talk about, are regulated by hormones. So what exactly are these hormones? They are special chemical substances released by the endocrine system, again, made and secreted by those glands, that affect other endocrine glands or body systems. Only certain hormones are able to communicate with certain cells. And that might remind you a little bit of like the substrate enzyme relationship where there's that lock and key matching system, and our endocrine system sort of works the same way. And again, we will continue obviously to discuss. This is just day 1. So now let's go through all the different glands of the endocrine system. Hoi, there's a lot. So endocrine glands. Some glands of the human endocrine system are, and we're about to go through them specifically, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenals, and the islets of Langerhans and the gonads. The ones that you want to remember most are the pituitary glands, the adrenal glands, and you definitely want to recognize that term gonads is referring to ovaries and testes. Hopefully you already know what those are, but we will continue to discuss the gonads when we discuss the reproductive system in Unit 6. So, and remember, those the ovaries and testes are both involved in the reproductive system, but they also produce hormones. So that's what makes them endocrine glands. So the pituitary gland is the master gland. It controls all of the other glands of the body and regulates growth. So the pituitary gland, responding to signals from the hypothalamus, which is part of the brain, the pituitary gland releases hormones, some of which control other endocrine glands, right? So you can think of the pituitary gland, it's this master gland with the master plan. The adrenal glands, sitting just atop your kidneys. Hold on, let's get some color coding action going on here. All right, so you can see there the pituitary gland. It's up here in your head. And if you've ever heard of Andre the Giant, who passed away far before I even think I was born, but he was a famous wrestler and actor, and he was giant, right? He had giantism, and he was so large because he had a pituitary gland disorder. And that is less common now that people actually grow to such a large size like he did, because we're better able to treat tumors in the pituitary gland that can cause an overproduction of these hormones that regulate growth and make you really, really, really tall. And sometimes when people do not grow to their fully expected height, they can take hormones that increase the secretion of growth hormones from the pituitary gland. And you've probably heard of HGH, that's human growth hormone. That makes us grow. And, after a certain age, obviously, you shouldn't be growing any taller, but some individuals that have pituitary gland disorders or a tumor in their pituitary gland, they can do just that. They can grow beyond the typical age frame for growing. And obviously that would affect their body's ability to maintain homeostasis as the person gets larger and larger and larger beyond a typical size. That puts strain on all the other body systems. All right, so the adrenal glands sitting just atop the kidneys there. You've probably heard of their chemical messenger, adrenaline. Also referred to as epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline. These are two chemical messengers, two hormones with an agonist-antagonist relationship. One increases the fight or flight response and the other one calms it down. So you can see there, these are just atop the kidneys, the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands make epinephrine and norepinephrine, the two hormones which cause the fight or flight response. They also secrete aldosterone, which affects the body's osmotic balance, right? And that term osmotic balance, you might recognize, oh, forgive my cat. She's experiencing some osmotic imbalance right now. But that osmotic balance is referring to blood filtration by the kidneys. Right? Because they're right next to our kidneys, it makes sense that they're involved in that. And the adrenal glands also produce cortisol, which is known as the stress hormone. So blood filtration is osmotic balance, and then cortisol is the stress hormone. And you can think of the adrenal glands as regulating that stress response. All right, so now we get into a very important function of this system, although all the functions are important, the role of the pancreas. So the pancreas functions as both an accessory organ of the digestive system and an endocrine gland. In its role as an endocrine gland, it produces two very important hormones, insulin and glucagon. which again have this agonist-antagonist relationship. One lowers blood sugar, one raises it, right? So insulin lowers your blood sugar levels and glucagon increases blood sugar levels. So let's say my body is like, Miss Parsons, you're drinking this drink from Starbucks. There's so much sugar in it. My body's going to release insulin to lower my blood sugar levels in response to the consumption of this glucose. But if it's been many, many hours, I've been busy grading some assignments, putting some comments on your work, all of a sudden, I haven't eaten in many hours. My body says your blood sugar is very low. It's going to release glucagon, which will break down my body's glycogen stores in order to raise blood sugar levels. So it can give me a spike in my blood sugar, even if I haven't eaten anything in a while, in response to low blood sugar in the pancreas. And this is a feedback. Oh, hold on. Let me go ahead and release my poor cat from her stress. So this is a homeostatic feedback loop. Right, so my body wants to maintain stable blood sugar. How does it do that? By ensuring that there is a hormone that can be released if my blood sugar gets too high, and there is a hormone that can be released if my blood sugar gets too low. If you have dysregulation of your body's blood sugar, if you experience either hypoglycemia, very low blood sugar, or hyperglycemia, very high blood sugar, it's likely that you may have a condition, diabetes, which we will talk more about when we get to endocrine system disorders. But if you're thinking, where have I heard of insulin before? You've likely heard of insulin before as a treatment for diabetes. Typically individuals that have diabetes have hyperglycemia or very high blood sugar. And depending upon the type of diabetes that they have, their body may be immune to insulin. So even though it's producing insulin, it's not helping lower blood sugar levels, or their body may not produce any insulin on its own, in which case they do need to consume it as a medication. All right, and then glucagon again would raise blood sugar in response to low blood sugar. So insulin lowers blood sugar when it gets too high. Glucagon raises blood sugar when it gets too low. All right. And the islets of Langerhans that we mentioned in the introduction, those are the functional units of the pancreas. It's functional units as an endocrine gland. So those islets of Langerhans are kind of like the nephrons in the kidneys. They are collections of functional tissues within the organ. Now let's talk about the gonads. The ovaries, found only in females, are a gland that produces estrogen and I don't like that. Ignore that. People can have ovaries that are not female. A gland that produces estrogen and progesterone. They are responsible for maintaining the menstrual cycle and the sexual development of the female body, such as enlargement of breasts, widening of hips, and pubic hair. These are called secondary sex characteristics, and they are controlled by hormones. Yes, but the full complement of hormones that is produced by the ovaries is responsible for maintaining and regulating the menstrual cycle and pregnancy, and maintaining a healthy pregnancy. But we'll talk a lot more about that when we get to the reproductive system. The testes, and again, no, that part's not true. Please disregard those first two sentences. Testes are a gland that produces testosterone, responsible for sexual development of the male body, such as deepening of the voice, muscle development, and pubic hair. And again, we'll talk much more about the gonads when we talk about the reproductive system, but we're just discussing their role here in the secretion of hormones. So we're talking about the development of secondary sex characteristics, which this is where we started our conversation, right? When you think about hormones, you're probably thinking about puberty, right? Your own development that most of you are around 14 years old. That probably is currently happening or happened to you recently. And that really helps understand how the endocrine system works, right? Puberty is not something that happens overnight. You don't wake up one morning and all of a sudden you're fully grown, your voice is deeper, depending upon your gender presentation, your voice is deeper, you've got hair under your arms, whatever the case may be. These characteristics develop over time because our endocrine system communicates slowly. So our endocrine system sends these hormones over time. These glands pick up these messages. We'll talk more about the specific mechanism of communication in day 2. But at receptor sites, these hormonal messages are received, these chemical messengers are picked up, and over time, changes occur. Changes to your sleep pattern, changes to your body composition, the width of your hips, how deep your voice sounds, all of these changes occur over time, right? Because this is slow chemical communication. Now, let's revisit the do now. Which hormone aids directly in reducing the sugar level of the blood? Well, hopefully you guys remember that insulin lowers blood sugar, right? Insulin lowers blood sugar. And we will, again, talk more about the specific mechanisms of the communication within the endocrine system as we go on to days 2 and 3. And an example of maintenance of homeostasis in humans is the action of glucagon and insulin in regulating the concentration of blood sugar, right? Which we discussed just here below. You guys may have noticed that the only 2 questions you have to answer are 1 and 2. However, these are important notes for you to have on the endocrine system. So I hope that you read them all along with me. I hope that you guys have a super fantastic day. Please don't forget to complete the exit ticket, and I'll see you all on Tuesday on Zoom. Bye, guys.